Today, I want to talk with you about our thought patterns and specifically negative thoughts and the inner critic. So, our thought patterns get developed for lots of different reasons. It can come from our childhood and what we learned and absorbed about how to think about things. It can come from our cultural expectations and our surroundings and the world around us. And it can just come from our own perspective and biases on life experiences. And one of my favorite phrases is Aristotle phrase, and essentially he says the mark of an educated mind is the ability to have a thought and not necessarily believe it. But what do we do when we get bombarded by the bully in our brain? It's hard to break sometimes, and the first level of beginning to break negative, self-sabotaging, inner critic thought habits is just to become aware that you're even doing it, that it's even happening. So I like to encourage people to become the inner scientist of their mind. You're observing it compassionately and non-judgmentally, like, oh, there's a negative thought. And just, that's interesting. Who does that sound like? Where does that come from? Oh, that totally sounds like my dad. That totally sounds like my boss. Whoever it may be, that does not sound like something I would say to someone that I love. So when we continue to have automatic negative thoughts, ants, it will continue to disrupt our mood, our lives, and overall just really wear and tear on how we feel. And so we can't help that they're automatic though, right? They're automatic because there's literally neural pathways already formed in your brain around those thought patterns. Imagine it being like a highway 285 of negative thoughts in your mind, or a highway 78 or 400 or wherever you live. And so when you have an experience or you're going about your day, the thought's just like a car that goes down that highway, and it goes down it pretty easily. That's why they're so automatic and so easy to believe. However, when you can become the compassionate inner scientist and observe, and then catch that thought, and then replace it with something a little more flexible, something a little more helpful, you'll begin to form a new highway, more or less, in your mind, weakening the old destructive, negative highway and beginning to reinforce a new one. So for those thoughts that maybe come up saying that you're not good enough, well, logically, you probably wouldn't say that to someone that you care about. And the idea is that you're no better or worse than anybody else, and that thought just isn't helpful. So you can replace it with something like, my performance or my dating status or social status is not a prerequisite for me being good enough. I'm already good enough, and I deserve love and belonging. Or that thought that comes up that just says, ugh, I'm such a failure. You could replace that with, I tried the hardest that I could, and it's okay for me to be bummed. However, I'm not a failure because I didn't get this job or I didn't get this thing. Or it could be a negative thought like, no one really cares about me. And replace that with, I care about me. And it's okay to feel sad that I'm missing connections right now. That's a normal human feeling. There's lists and affirmations and all these things that we can tell ourselves to begin to restructure and rewire our brain. And some of them may feel weird, and some of them may feel like, I can't really believe that. But if you ask yourself this one question, is that thought helpful? Even if you feel like the thought is accurate, is that thought helpful? And the answer is no. Then you have a responsibility to your own well-being, to your own self-care, to begin to change those thought habits. So here's the good news, is that the more you practice doing this, you're catching your thought, you're checking it, and then you're changing it. And even though it feels hard to do initially, the more you do it, the easier it will come, because your brain will naturally start to realize, oh, I have another tool. I'm going to offer you this thought as well. And so then you can choose which highway you want to go down. And then the more you do it, the easier it gets. So in terms of regaining control of your mood, your mental health, and your life, it's going to start with simple thought processes, the ability to be flexible in your thinking. One of the biggest signs of psychological maturity is flexible thinking. So my challenge for you all is just to begin to observe your thoughts, those automatic negative thoughts, call them ants, and then ask yourself, is this helpful? And from there, start to replace it with something new. It's not just enough to cut the thoughts off and pretend like you didn't actually think that, because you did, and it's going to bum you out. But then to go in and replace it with something a little more helpful, a little more neutral, a little more positive even, if you can go there. And then begin that process and just see how it feels. If anything, it's going to feel less miserable than those automatic negative thoughts that you were just having. So this is your tip for the day. I hope you all got some valuable information from this, and I look forward to talking with you all soon.